video. Today we are going to talk about a cult that existed in the United States that you probably have never heard of. I imagine some people out there have, but for as bizarre and crazy that this cult and case is, I am surprised that I haven't heard about it. So I am very curious to know if you have heard of this one and, of course, your thought on it. So we're going to talk about an evil cult leader that claimed to be an angel and essentially receive messages from angels, and he would have inappropriate relations with children in order to, in his mind, fix them and keep himself alive. And then there are more interesting details that go along with this that we will dive into together. So before we go into that, let me get our housekeeping items out of the way. First, in the comment section down below, you will find a pinned comment from me with 3 cases that I am interested in covering. Please take a look at that list and comment down below with your vote so we can choose together. Second request, I recently created a Discord channel, and if you're not familiar with Discord, it is a safe and free app that you can download, and we have a private forum or channel for Neon Moon where anybody that is a part of our community here on YouTube can join. We talk about all things true crime and not true crime. We get to know each other on a more personal level, which I think is really cool. And I know sometimes people aren't comfortable commenting publicly on YouTube, especially with ASMR or true crime ASMR. So this is a safe space to do that, and I will put the link in the pinned comment as well. And then third and final request, if you enjoy the content that you hear today, I humbly request that you give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. Okay, that concludes our housekeeping, so let's dive into this insane story. So, Angel's Landing was the name given to a 20-acre compound near Valley Center and Ketchie outside of Wichita, Kansas. The commune was led by Lou Castro, whose actual given name was Daniel Perez, and he went by many different names, but for the sake of this story, he is Lou Castro, and he held power over his followers by making them believe he was an angel and seer who could travel into the future. He claimed that he could tell his followers how they were going to die using his angelic powers. And for a lot of people, that would be very intriguing information, right? Like, I think a lot of people would want to know how they're going to die or when. So I can see why, especially a more vulnerable population might be interested in that. Now, this part is what's just abhorrent, but he also told them he was hundreds of years old, and in order to stay alive, he would need to have inappropriate relations with children, and this would lead to the repeated assaults of dozens of children. His assault victims ranged from the age of 8 to 16, and he would later be convicted of multiple offenses from 2001 to 2011. He was also linked to the suspicious deaths of 6 adults whose life insurance policies would be claimed by this cult. Now, investigators were aware of the commune but struggled to pin down exactly what was going on. The Angels Landing cult moved from state to state, making it very difficult to track exactly what they were doing. And this is not uncommon if you have followed along with other cult stories. They are pretty notorious for moving around to kind of evade the authorities. And it would end up being that when they were based in Kansas, that an actual true investigation had the opportunity to look deeper. Angels Landing had actually been investigated since 2006, but nothing solid could actually be pinned on them. And it would end up being their unexplained wealth that opened the doorway for authorities to finally take a closer look inside this cult. So let's talk about that some more. So Lou Castro did not work, but most of the vehicles on his commune were new and expensive, with most cars worth over $40,000. There was no paper trail leading to their purchases, which made it challenging for investigators to go about their business. But this was a red flag for investigators. Also on the commune, there was a luxury swimming pool and multiple houses on within like this 20-acre span, which also would not have been cheap by any means to build. And in 2003, when Castro settled on Kansas being his base for this commune, he would bring another family into the fold, and their name is the McGrath family, which included 15-year-old Sarah McGrath, 11-year-old Emily, and their mother, who was a real estate agent, and the mother helped Castro secure this large 20-acre property. Now, Sarah, the 15-year-old, would share that her mother had a bond with Mr. Castro that she did not understand, and she herself took an instant disliking to him, who would go on to assault her on regular occasions as part of the cult's indoctrination and to keep the angel within him alive. In June of 2003, Sarah was informed by her sister Emily that one of the commune's followers had mysteriously died in the swimming pool. Is that suspicious or no? One of the cult members, Patricia Hughes, had apparently slipped and fallen into the swimming pool and drowned. Now, remember earlier when I said that Mr. Castro claimed that he was capable of seeing into the future when people would die? Well, Castro had predicted that this is exactly how Patricia Hughes would die. This death would alert the authorities to the commune, but still had really no evidence to move in and find out what was going on. Now, to these cult followers, this wasn't suspicious. They really believed that Castro had these capabilities to know when and how, well, not really when, more so how people were going to Castro for comfort and guidance. He would tell Castro about his feelings and future, and Castro would tell him that he would have his chance to see his wife Patricia on the other side. And they had this kind of a session where Castro essentially, quote unquote, travels to the future and predicated that Brian would die in a vehicle accident. And so, in some way, that was to offer Brian solace and comfort, knowing that he would one day see his wife again. 3 years later, in 2006, Brian would die in a freak accident at an auto shop where he was working on his car. Now, the death actually ends up being suspicious, so Wichita detective Ron Goodwin took on the case and would dive into the inner workings of Angel's Landing. Almost immediately, this detective, Ron Goodwin, struggled because there were really no information or records of Castro. For the other cult members, he did manage to dig up personal and financial data and began building a profile of the group based on the members. This detective would follow Castro to local restaurants and try digging through the trash afterwards to find a fingerprint or something like that. And as his investigation deepened, Goodwin would uncover the potential source of the cult's funds. Castro had collected a $1.24 million life insurance payout from Patricia Yu's death and another $1 million from Brian's death. So, I'm sure we all know when life insurance gets involved, especially when the connecting lines are kind of fuzzy and weird like this one, red flags get raised. And to Goodwin, it seemed that these accidents were no accidents at all. In 2011, a year after Castro moved from Kansas to Tennessee, a Kansas-based witness came forward and said that she saw Castro get into the pool with Patricia and drown her. And Castro knew that this girl saw him that day with Patricia, and he reportedly told her to wait 20 minutes while he drove into town to create an alibi for himself, basically making it sound like he wasn't even on the commune at the time of Patricia's death. Castro would tell this girl after 20 minutes she needed to jump into the pool in an attempt to save Patricia on the basis that she had fallen into the pool while rescuing her dog. For nearly a decade, this really abused girl had to live with the guilt that she couldn't save Patricia when she had actually already been killed by Castro, which is just so sad. Clearly, we have a master manipulator on our hands, and he absolutely preyed on the vulnerable, and it's just sad to think that this girl had to carry that guilt with her. Now, just as a side note, in a very bizarre twist, down the line, Castro would actually end up claiming that Patricia had basically given herself to the cult and agreed upon her death so that the group could cash in on her insurance, which is just bizarre. Now, with all of this going on, Detective Goodwin has motive for these accidental deaths, and he knows about the accusations of sexual assault, the cashing in of life insurance, the suspicious deaths, all of this stuff, but he still has no idea who Castro is. As I mentioned briefly just a few moments ago, Castro would move from charges to Tennessee in 2010, and he does so in an effort to evade the law, and he creates yet again another new identity for himself and goes by the name of Joe Venegas. Shortly after moving to Tennessee, Castro would be arrested for identity theft and fraudulent use of a social security number. Because of this, he would be charged and sentenced to 2 years in prison, which gave the FBI and Detective Goodwin enough time to do more research and actually gain information into his past lives. So this was the key that Goodwin really needed. They would use witness statements from the abandoned followers to piece together his life and find out more information. And they would discover that Lou Castro did not exist and that his real name was Daniel Perez, a Texas man who was on the run from state police after being charged with sex crimes against 2 underage girls. When the survivors of the Angel's Landing cult began to open up and talk to the FBI about what had happened to them, Detective Goodwin really began to see the extent of his crimes. One witness, who was only 11 at the time, said that she submitted to Perez sexually and mentally as she lived in fear of her life and the life of her family, some of whom were not followers of Angel's Landing. Other interviews with cult members suggested that up to 6 people had died in suspicious accidents from 2001 to 2010. And in each of these cases, Perez, again, who was also Mr. Castro, had claimed their life insurance on behalf of the cult, amounting to approximately $7 million over a period of 9 years. Now, in addition to providing Perez with an income, the predictions that he claimed to be capable of helped convince his followers that he truly was both a seer and an angel. With all of this information pulled together, the FBI was able to really move forward with arresting him, really able to move forward with adding these charges, and so in 2014 he would be taken back to Kansas, where his trial would begin a year later. He would end up being convicted on 1 count of first-degree murder, 1 count of sexual exploitation of a child, 3 aggravated assaults, 7 aggravated sodomies, 8 accounts of rape, and 8 counts of making false statements, though he was charged with more rapes and involvements in the deaths of some of his followers. In February of 2015, he was sentenced to 2 life terms and would be eligible for parole in the year 2095, at which time he would be 134 years old, which means he's likely never getting out of the Lansing Correctional Facility in Kansas. Now, just to go back to who Daniel Perez was and what had transpired when he started this trail of crimes. He was a fugitive from Texas, and he ends up leaving Texas around 1997 before he could be sentenced for indecency with a child. And he would collect his entourage along the way. Some of these people would move from state to state with him, and they would live in like a commune style across, the state to travel, and along the way, clearly, he would draw suspicion, but not necessarily from authorities. It was from relatives of his associates, from neighbors and acquaintances, and eventually we know from the FBI and the Sedgwick County Sheriff's Office. But I do just want to talk about a North Dakota connection that he stumbles upon. So it's either 1996 or 1997 in a small North Dakota town. Lionel Lemire Sr. would meet Perez and did not like what he saw. One day, Lemire's daughter, who was about 15 years old at the time, brought a man to meet her father and introduced him as Danny Perez. Lemire recalled that the two men would sit across the table from each other, and it was clear that Perez was far too old to be dating his daughter. Around that time, Perez would have had to have been in his late 30s at the time, so more than 20 years older than Lemire's daughter. Now, Lemire suspected that Perez was an illegal immigrant, and he ends up reporting Perez to the Border Patrol, and Perez ends up getting put in a local jail. And for years, Lemire thought that Perez had actually been deported, and it wouldn't be until 2010 that Lemire would get a call from the FBI saying that investigators were checking into Mr. Perez's background. Now, interestingly enough, that same daughter she would end up leaving North Dakota and going to South Dakota a couple years later, and she would end up moving from one state to another with Perez, and her dad never knew, so somehow she gets reconnected to Perez, and I wasn't able to find her name, which is fine. It doesn't really even matter, because she was, underage at the time, and according to investigation, of course, she ends up being a victim as well. And then I'm gonna jump us back to Texas again here real quick. So in January 1997, a grand jury in B County, Texas, indicted Perez, accusing him of multiple sex crimes in 1996 with two girls under 17, according to court documents. When he was arrested, his B County jail information sheet said he was white and Hispanic, around 5 feet 6 inches tall, 135 pounds, with medium skin tone, short black hair, and brown eyes, and that his last known address was in Beeville, Texas. But years later, he would have long black hair and told people that he was a Native American, and he would also gain about 25 pounds, so he was kind of able to pass off as another person. And according to a March 1997 plea agreement in Texas, Perez pleaded no contest to second-degree indecency with a child, sexual contact, and was facing 3 years of community supervision. But according to court documents, he fled before sentencing, and then he would just move right along and eventually form this Angels Cult landing that we've learned about today. So that will conclude the case of the Angels Landing cult. Daniel Perez somehow managed to be a fugitive and could hide in plain sight, but eventually the law caught up to him. It's really quite devastating how many young women he harmed, and the trauma that he placed over them in their lives, in addition to murdering a bunch of people, basically, but passing it off as, freak accidents, or, really just freak accidents. And out on their life insurance policies to just further fund his lifestyle that he wanted to live and continue on harming people. And if you guys have been following me for a while, you know that I am just wildly fascinated by the cases that have some kind of ties to religion or spiritual connection. So whenever somebody claims to be doing something in the name of religion, I'm just baffled. This one isn't really so much religion to me, but it's definitely a spiritual level because angels are involved, and so there has to be some kind of belief system with that one. It wasn't really clear if he felt like he was called to do this or if he was contacted by angels. So I don't necessarily think that there was some religious or spiritual conviction. I think it was really just the story that he told and cover for himself. But I don't think he was actually really a religious man, but nonetheless fascinating. So please let me know your thoughts on this case. Please comment down below with your